The second, Ilhan Omar accused Tulsi Gabbard of being an Islamophobic warmonger on national television. She sealed her fate. She'd walked into a battle she thought she could win with the same tired playbook that had saved her before. Cry racism, claim victimhood, let the media run defense. But this time, she faced an opponent who'd spent 2 decades in military service, who understood what real combat looks like, who'd brought something Omar never expected: evidence. Mountains of it. Documented, verified, undeniable. Omar had prepared for a debate. Tulsi had prepared for war. What unfolded over the next 120 minutes would become the most watched political confrontation in American history. It would expose secrets Omar thought were buried forever. It would force mainstream media to cover stories they'd spent years ignoring. It would answer the question millions of Americans had been asking since the day Ilhan Omar took her oath of office. Does she actually love this country, or does she just love what it gave her? If you've ever wondered what happens when someone who served America in uniform confronts someone who seems to resent everything America stands for, you're about to witness it in excruciating detail. And when you see what Tulsi pulls out at the 47-minute mark, Omar's reaction will tell you everything you need to know. The green room at Fox News headquarters in Manhattan buzzed with an energy that felt almost electric. This wasn't just another cable news debate. Everyone in the building knew it. The producers knew it. The camera operators knew it. Even the interns fetching coffee knew they were about to witness something unprecedented. In the hallway outside Studio 4, security had been tripled. Not because of credible threats, though there had been dozens of those since the debate was announced, but because the network anticipated protests. They anticipated counter-protests. They anticipated that when you put Ilhan Omar and Tulsi Gabbard in the same room with cameras rolling, things would get intense in ways that required preparation. They had no idea how right they were. Ilhan Omar arrived at Fox News at 4:30 in the afternoon, 90 minutes before airtime. Her entrance was theatrical. A small convoy of black SUVs pulling up to the 6th Avenue entrance. Security personnel flanking her on both sides. Advisors surrounding her like a protective barrier. She wore a burgundy hijab that matched her blazer perfectly, designer labels visible even from a distance, jewelry that probably cost more than most Americans make in a month. This was her armor, the image of success, the refugee who'd made it, the Muslim woman who'd broken barriers. But underneath the carefully constructed exterior there was nervousness. Her team had spent 3 days preparing for this debate, wargaming every possible attack angle, rehearsing responses, crafting the perfect victim narrative. They'd practiced the Islamophobia defense. They'd rehearsed the racism deflection. They'd prepared for policy questions, for gotcha moments, for everything they could anticipate. What they hadn't prepared for was the truth. Omar's green room became command central within minutes. 7 staffers filled the space immediately. Her communications director, a sharp woman named Sarah who'd worked on 3 presidential campaigns, was on her phone before Omar even sat down. 2 crisis management consultants, brought in specifically for this debate, huddled in the corner reviewing strategy. A makeup artist began work immediately. An audio technician checked her microphone. An assistant laid out talking points on cards, color-coded by topic. The energy was controlled chaos, professional, organized, but beneath it all there was tension. Because everyone in that room knew about the vulnerabilities, the marriage allegations that wouldn't die, the campaign finance irregularities that kept surfacing, the statements about terrorism that haunted her timeline, the anti-Semitic tweets she'd never fully explained. They'd built defenses for all of it, but defenses only work if your opponent doesn't have proof. And the question nobody in Omar's camp could answer was, what does Tulsi actually have? Sarah, the communications director, reviewed the game plan one more time. Remember, if she brings up the marriage stuff, immediate pivot to Islamophobia. Don't engage with the specifics. Call it a conspiracy theory rooted in bigotry. If she goes after your statements on terrorism, frame it as deliberate misinterpretation of your words. If she attacks your foreign policy positions, remind everyone about your lived experience as a refugee. Omar nodded, barely listening. She'd heard this before. She'd used this playbook successfully for years. Why would tonight be different? One of the crisis consultants, a man named David who specialized in scandal management, added his input. The key is controlling the narrative. You're the victim here. You're the Muslim woman being attacked by the establishment. You're the refugee being targeted by xenophobia. Frame everything through that lens and the progressive base will rally behind you. More nodding, more confidence building, more assurance that the old tactics would work. They were building a house of cards on quicksand. Tulsi Gabbard arrived at Fox News at 5:15, 45 minutes later than Omar, 45 minutes before airtime. No convoy, no entourage. She pulled up in a standard sedan driven by a single aide. She wore simple professional attire, a navy blazer, white blouse, minimal jewelry, and an American flag pin on her lapel. The contrast with Omar's arrival couldn't have been more stark. While Omar had brought 7 staffers, Tulsi brought 2. Her chief of staff, a former Army major named Eric who'd served with her in Iraq, and a research assistant named Jennifer who'd spent the last month compiling documentation. Tulsi's green room was quiet, almost eerily so. While Omar's team created organized chaos, Tulsi sat alone reviewing an iPad, methodically checking facts, cross-referencing sources, ensuring every single allegation she planned to make could be backed up with evidence. Eric sat nearby, occasionally offering input. We've got the marriage timeline confirmed from 3 separate sources. The tax return discrepancies are documented in the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board filings. The FEC reports on the payments to Minot's firm are public record. Everything's solid. Tulsi didn't look up from her iPad. What about the Somalia trip footage? Jennifer pulled out her laptop. We've got the full video of her speech. The ask us what country we're from quote is at timestamp 11 minutes 47 seconds. Crystal clear. No context that makes it better. And the Al-Qaeda air quotes. Multiple camera angles. We can show it from 3 different perspectives. She physically makes the air quotes gesture when saying Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. It's undeniable. Tulsi finally looked up. Her expression was calm, focused, almost serene. This was a soldier preparing for battle. She'd done this before in actual combat zones where the stakes were life and death. A television debate, even a contentious one, was just another mission. And like every mission, success depended on preparation. What's the opening move? Eric asked. Let her attack first, Tulsi said simply. She'll come out swinging because that's her pattern. She'll try to put me on defense immediately with accusations of Islamophobia or warmongering. Let her. Because the moment she attacks, I respond with her own words, not my interpretation, not my analysis, her actual statements. Jennifer nodded. The some people did something clip. First response. The moment she calls me Islamophobic, I show America how she described 9/11. Then we move through the anti-Semitism. Then the marriage fraud. Then the campaign finance corruption. Then the terrorism apologia. Step by step, methodical, documented. Eric smiled slightly. She's going to try the victim card. Of course she will. It's all she has. But victim cards don't trump documented evidence. And that's all I'm bringing tonight. No speculation. No conspiracy theories. Just her own words, her own actions, and public records that anyone can verify. Tulsi went back to her iPad, scrolling through the timeline of events they'd constructed. Every allegation organized chronologically. Every piece of evidence labeled and sourced. Every response prepared with surgical precision. This wasn't a debate strategy. This was a military operation. At 6 o'clock, both participants were brought to the studio for final preparations. The set was designed to maximize confrontation. 2 podiums positioned at angles facing each other, only about 12 feet apart. Close enough to see facial expressions clearly. Close enough to make avoidance impossible. Behind them, massive LED screens capable of displaying video, documents, images, anything needed to support arguments. Martha McCallum, chosen to moderate because of her reputation for fairness and her ability to handle contentious situations, sat at her desk between the podiums. She'd moderated presidential debates, Supreme Court confirmation hearings, every kind of high-stakes political confrontation imaginable. But even she felt the tension building in this room. The studio audience was already seated. 200 people carefully selected to represent different perspectives. On the left side of the audience, Omar supporters, many wearing hijabs, some in squad merchandise. Progressive activists who'd made Ilhan Omar their champion. They sat with the confidence of people who believed their candidate would emerge victorious, that accusations of bigotry would silence critics once again. On the right side, Tulsi supporters, military veterans in uniform or wearing service pins, conservative activists, people wearing American flag apparel. They sat with anticipation, hoping that finally someone would hold Omar accountable, that finally the questions that had been dismissed for years would get real answers. In the middle, a small section of genuinely undecided voters, independents, people who wanted to hear both sides and make up their own minds. They would become the most important witnesses to what was about to unfold. The technical crew ran final checks, cameras positioned to capture every angle, microphones tested and retested, the LED screens behind the podiums displaying the Fox News logo, ready to switch to whatever evidence would be presented. Lighting adjusted to ensure both participants would be clearly visible. At 6:20, a producer's voice came through the studio speakers. 10 minutes to air. Final preparations, please. Ilhan Omar stood at her podium reviewing note cards one last time. She looked confident. Her posture was straight. Her expression was composed. She'd done this before. She'd handled tough interviews. She'd debated Republicans who hated her. She'd faced hostile crowds. This would be no different. Attack, deflect, claim victimhood. Let the media clean up afterward. Standard procedure. Tulsi Gabbard stood at her podium, hands resting lightly on its surface, iPad placed precisely in front of her. She wasn't reviewing anything. She wasn't nervous. She was simply waiting, a soldier at the starting line. She'd run this mission in her head 100 times. She knew every move, every countermove, every possible response and how she'd address it. Her military training had taught her something valuable. Amateurs train until they get it right. Professionals train until they can't get it wrong. She trained for this moment, not with debate coaches or communications consultants, but by methodically assembling facts, organizing evidence, and preparing to present truth so clearly that deflection would be impossible. Martha McCallum looked at her notes one final time, then at both participants. "We're going to have a substantive discussion tonight," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been doing this for decades. "I expect both of you to respect the format and each other. We'll have opening statements, then structured questions, then opportunities for direct engagement, and finally audience questions." Omar nodded, still reviewing her cards. Tulsi simply said, "Understood." At 6:28, the producer's voice came through again. 2 minutes, places please." The studio lights brightened. The audience settled into complete silence. The cameras went live. In the control room, the director watched multiple monitors simultaneously, ready to cut to whichever angle would best capture the confrontation. Because everyone involved in this production understood something fundamental. This wasn't just another political debate. This was a reckoning. Years of questions, years of allegations, years of accusations deflected with claims of bigotry. All of it was about to come to a head in front of millions of viewers. At 6:29 and 30 seconds, the theme music began. The Fox News logo filled the screens. At 6:30 precisely, Martha McCallum looked directly into the camera and spoke words that would introduce the most explosive political debate in American television history. "Good evening. I'm Martha McCallum. Tonight, a debate that America needs. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard face off on immigration, foreign policy, representation, and the question of what it means to serve America. Welcome to both of you." The cameras pulled back to show both participants at their podiums. The contrast was immediate and striking. Omar in designer clothing and expensive jewelry, every inch the successful politician. Tulsi in simple professional attire with her flag pin, every inch the combat veteran. "Congresswoman Omar, we'll begin with you. Martha said, consulting her notes. "You've often spoken about bringing diverse voices to Congress and representing communities that have been historically underrepresented. How do you respond to critics who say—" "Martha, before we discuss anything else," Omar interrupted, her voice already taking on that familiar tone of righteous indignation, "I think it's essential that we acknowledge what's really happening here tonight." Martha's eyebrows raised slightly, but she gestured for Omar to continue. "I am a black Muslim woman serving in Congress. I am a refugee who came to this country seeking safety, and from the moment I took office I have faced relentless attacks, not criticism of my policies, attacks on my very existence, on my faith, on my right to be here, on my identity as a Muslim woman who dares to speak truth to power." She turned to face Tulsi directly, her expression hardening. "And some of those attacks, some of the most vicious attacks, have come from Tulsi Gabbard, a person who has built her political career on Islamophobia, on defending war crimes, on serving the military-industrial complex that has killed hundreds of thousands of Muslims around the world." The audience stirred. This was escalating fast. Omar's voice rose, passion building with each word. "Tulsi Gabbard has spent years attacking Muslims, questioning our loyalty, supporting policies that target our communities. She has participated in wars that destroyed Muslim countries. She has defended actions that any honest person would call war crimes. And now she sits here pretending to have moral authority to question me." She shook her head, her expression one of disgust mixed with defiance. "Tulsi Gabbard is an Islamophobic war criminal, and someone who has participated in the murder of innocent Muslims has absolutely no standing, no credibility, no right to sit in judgment of someone who actually fights for Muslim rights and dignity every single day." The room went completely silent. She just called a decorated combat veteran, a woman who'd served her country in uniform for over 20 years, a war criminal, on national television. In the opening minutes of the debate, it was bold, reckless, and exactly what Tulsi had been waiting for. Tulsi Gabbard didn't react with anger. She didn't look offended. She didn't even look surprised. Instead, she smiled. Not a happy smile, but the smile of a chess player who just watched their opponent make the exact move they'd anticipated. The smile of a soldier who just seen the enemy expose their position. "Congresswoman Omar," Tulsi said, her voice calm, measured, almost gentle in its control, "those are extraordinarily serious accusations. War criminal, Islamophobe, murderer. These aren't casual insults. They have legal meaning. They have moral weight. They have consequences." She paused, letting her words settle over the audience. "I served in Iraq as part of a medical unit. Do you know what medics do, Congresswoman? We save lives. We treat wounded soldiers and civilians regardless of who they are, what side they're on, what they believe. Iraqi lives, American lives, coalition lives, enemy combatants who were trying to kill us just hours earlier. We treated everyone who needed help because that's what medics do. That's what I did." Her voice remained calm, but steel had entered it. "So when you call me a war criminal, you're calling the act of saving lives a war crime. When you call me a murderer, you're calling medical treatment murder. When you say I participated in killing Muslims, you're ignoring the fact that many of the lives we saved were Muslim lives." Tulsi's expression hardened slightly, her military bearing becoming more pronounced. "But since you want to talk about attitudes toward violence and terrorism, since you want to question who has moral authority on these issues, let's examine your statements. Specifically, let's discuss how you described September 11th. She nodded toward the control room. The massive LED screens behind both podiums came to life. Footage appeared. Ilhan Omar at a CAIR event, March 2019, speaking to an audience about civil liberties and Muslim American rights. The video was crystal clear, professionally recorded, undeniable. Omar's voice filled the studio through the speakers. CAIR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something, and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. The clip continued playing. In context, it was actually worse than the quote alone suggested. Omar said it dismissively, with a casual shrug, as if the worst terrorist attack in American history was a minor inconvenience, an unfortunate incident that had led to the real problem: restrictions on civil liberties. Tulsi let the clip finish. Let it play completely. Let the words hang in the air. Let the audience absorb what they just heard. Some people did something, Tulsi repeated slowly, deliberately, emphasizing each word. That's how you described September 11th. The murder of 2,977 Americans. The deadliest terrorist attack in our nation's history. The event that changed everything about how we understand security and terrorism and threat. Some people did something. She looked directly at Omar, her gaze unwavering. I was in New York shortly after 9/11, Congresswoman. I saw the aftermath. I walked through streets that still smelled like burning debris. I saw the missing person posters covering every available surface, desperate families searching for loved ones who would never come home. I saw the memorials, the flowers, the candles, the photos of victims. I saw the grief that consumed that entire city, the trauma that marked a generation. Her voice was rising now, controlled but building with genuine emotion. And I enlisted in the Army National Guard because of what I saw. I joined because I wanted to serve the country that had been attacked. I wanted to defend America against the people who had murdered thousands of innocent civilians. That's why I put on a uniform. That's why I deployed to combat zones. That's why I spent 20 years in military service. She pointed at the frozen image of Omar on the screen behind them. And you described it as some people did something. Not terrorists, not Al-Qaeda, not 19 jihadists who hijacked 4 planes and deliberately flew them into buildings to kill as many Americans as possible. Not a carefully planned and coordinated attack designed to murder civilians and create terror. Some people did something. The audience was completely silent. Even Omar's supporters seemed uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Tulsi's voice softened, but became even more intense. You came to America as a refugee when you were 12 years old. You came from Somalia, from war and chaos and violence and starvation. America gave you safety. This country gave you shelter when you had nowhere else to go. America gave you education, opportunities, eventually a seat in Congress representing American citizens. You have been given everything this country has to offer. She leaned forward slightly, her hands gripping the edges of her podium. And you cannot properly describe the attack that changed this nation forever. You minimize it. You reduce it to some people did something. You treat the murder of 3,000 Americans as a trivial detail, as background noise, as something barely worth mentioning on your way to making a point about civil liberties. Omar tried to interrupt, her hand rising. That quote was taken completely out of. The context doesn't help you, Tulsi cut her off firmly. I've watched the full video multiple times. I know exactly what you were saying. You were making an argument about civil liberties and surveillance, which is a legitimate policy discussion. But the way you described 9/11, the casual dismissiveness with which you referenced the worst terrorist attack in American history, that reveals something. She shook her head slowly. You called me Islamophobic, but I served alongside Muslim soldiers in Iraq. I ate meals with them. I trained with them. I trusted them with my life in combat zones, and they trusted me with theirs. We had Muslims, Christians, Jews, Hindus, atheists, all serving together in uniform. We were Americans first. Our faith was personal, but our service was shared. Her voice turned to steel. You called me a war criminal, but I saved lives in a combat zone. I provided medical treatment to wounded Iraqis with the same level of care I gave to wounded Americans. I treated enemy combatants who had been trying to kill us just hours before. That's what medical professionals do. That's what I did. She pointed directly at the screen, where Omar's image was frozen. But you called 9/11 some people did something. You minimized the worst attack on American soil in history. You couldn't bring yourself to properly acknowledge the murder of 3,000 innocent people. You reduced it to a casual phrase, something barely worth noting. Her final line was delivered with quiet, devastating intensity. So let me ask you something, Congresswoman. Who actually disrespects America here? The veteran who served it in combat, risked her life for it, honored her oath to defend it, or the refugee who minimizes its murdered dead, who can't properly acknowledge the sacrifice of thousands, who treats terrorism as some people doing something. The audience erupted. Half rose to their feet in applause. The other half sat in stunned or angry silence. Martha McCallum tried to regain control of the room, her voice cutting through the noise. Let's maintain order, please. Congresswoman Omar, you have a right to respond." But Omar sat at her podium looking furious and caught completely off guard. She'd come here to attack Tulsi, to put her on defense with accusations of bigotry. Instead, within the first 10 minutes, she'd been confronted with the one statement that had haunted her more than any other. The one quote she could never quite explain away. The one moment that revealed something fundamental about her perspective. She'd called a decorated veteran a war criminal, and in response, she'd been exposed for minimizing 9/11. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Share this if you see the problem. Comment 9/11 if you remember what actually happened. Because some people did something isn't how Americans describe the worst terrorist attack in our history. Martha McCallum, recognizing that the debate had already gone far beyond her planned questions, decided to let it play out organically. She'd been a journalist long enough to know when to step back and let the story unfold. "Congresswoman Omar, your response." Omar gathered herself, falling back on familiar territory. "These attacks are rooted in Islamophobia and—" "No," Tulsi said firmly, her voice cutting through Omar's attempt to deflect. "Let's talk about your attacks, specifically your attacks on Jewish Americans." She pulled out her iPad and new images appeared on the LED screens. Screenshots of tweets, old social media posts, public statements, all meticulously documented and sourced. The first image showed a tweet from Omar, dated February 10, 2019. "It's all about the Benjamin's baby," with a musical note emoji, responding to a question about why American politicians support Israel. The second image was older, from 2012. "Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel." The third image showed multiple screenshots of Omar comparing Israel to Nazi Germany, defending the BDS movement, questioning the loyalty of American Jews who support Israel. The evidence mounted on the screens, tweet after tweet, statement after statement, creating an undeniable pattern. "The United States House of Representatives condemned you," Tulsi said, looking up from her iPad, her voice carrying the weight of documented fact. "Not once, twice, for anti-Semitism." She pulled up the official House resolutions on the screens. House Resolution 183, passed in March 2019, condemning anti-Semitism as hateful expressions of intolerance. Prompted directly by your statements. Your own party, your own Democratic colleagues, felt compelled to pass a formal resolution condemning anti-Semitism because of things you said. Omar tried to defend herself. "I was criticizing the Israeli government's policies, which is legitimate political." "It's all about the Benjamins is not policy criticism," Tulsi interrupted sharply. "That's an anti-Semitic trope. The idea that Jews use money to control policy, to buy influence, to manipulate government. It's one of the oldest, most vile stereotypes in history, and it's exactly what you tweeted." She switched to a different image on the screens. "Israel has hypnotized the world." That's another classic anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. The idea that Jews have mystical power, that they can control global opinion through some kind of spell or manipulation. You didn't say Israeli policy is wrong or I disagree with this action. You said Israel has hypnotized the world. Those are your exact words. The evidence continued mounting. More tweets, more statements, each one revealing a pattern that became impossible to dismiss. And when people called you out, when Jewish organizations expressed concern, when your own colleagues said this crosses a line, you didn't genuinely apologize. You didn't acknowledge that these were harmful statements. You said you were being misunderstood. You claimed your words were being taken out of context. You positioned yourself as the victim while attacking another minority group using the oldest stereotypes imaginable. Tulsi put down her iPad and looked directly at Omar. her expression one of contempt mixed with disbelief. "Let me ask you something, Congresswoman. If I tweeted it's all about the welfare when discussing social programs primarily used by Black Americans, what would you call me?" Silence. "If I said Somalia has hypnotized its diaspora, what would you call me?" Still silence. "You'd call me racist. And you would be absolutely right, because those would be racist statements using stereotypes to attack and demean an entire group of people based on their identity." She leaned forward. "But when you do the exact same thing to Jews, when you use stereotypes about money and control and hypnotic power, you call it policy criticism. When people condemn you for it, you call them Islamophobic. You use your identity as a shield while attacking others using their identity as a weapon." Tulsi pulled up more evidence on the screens. "You've compared Israel to Nazi Germany multiple times. You've supported the BDS movement, which even many progressive Democrats acknowledge has anti-Semitic undertones. You've questioned whether American Jews who support Israel have dual loyalty, suggesting they're more loyal to a foreign country than to America. That's another classic anti-Semitic accusation that's been used to marginalize and attack Jews for centuries." The screens showed the House condemnation resolutions again, the official documents unmistakable. These resolutions weren't passed by Republicans trying to score political points. These were your own party condemning you. Nancy Pelosi, who was Speaker at the time. Steny Hoyer, the Majority Leader. Your own Democratic colleagues saying this has gone too far, this crosses a line, this cannot be tolerated. Omar's face was flushed now, her composed exterior cracking. When the Democratic leadership feels compelled to pass formal resolutions condemning anti-Semitism because of your statements, that's significant. That's your own party saying you're wrong. That's your allies distancing themselves from you. Tulsi's voice hardened further. "You called me Islamophobic, but I have never attacked Muslims for being Muslim. I have never used stereotypes about Muslims. I have never questioned the loyalty of Muslim Americans. I criticize specific policies, specific actions, specific statements. I question behavior, not identity. I debate ideas, not existence." She pointed at the screens filled with Omar's tweets and statements. "You attack Jews using anti-Semitic tropes. You attack their identity. You question their loyalty. You use conspiracy theories about their supposed power and influence. That's not policy criticism. That's not legitimate political debate. That's bigotry." Her final statement was delivered with barely controlled anger. "Jewish refugees came to America fleeing genocide. 6 million murdered in the Holocaust because of the exact same conspiracy theories you're spreading. The same Jews control things with money garbage. The same Jews have secret power to manipulate the world nonsense. They came here seeking safety and opportunity, just like your family did." She shook her head in disgust. "And you attack them using the language that led to their extermination. You perpetuate the stereotypes that caused the worst genocide in human history. That's not advocacy. That's not speaking truth to power. That's hatred. And your own party knows it. They condemned you. Twice. The House of Representatives condemned her twice for anti-Semitism, but she calls others bigots. Comment if you see the hypocrisy. Share if you think representatives shouldn't spread hatred against any group." Martha McCallum, now fully committed to letting this confrontation unfold, tried to move to her next planned topic. "Let's discuss immigration policy, which both of you have strong views on." "Yes, let's discuss immigration," Omar jumped in, clearly relieved to pivot to what she thought was safer ground. "I advocate for comprehensive immigration reform because I understand the immigrant experience personally. I came here as a refugee. I know what it's like to flee violence and seek safety. I know." "Let's discuss your immigration story," Tulsi interrupted. "Specifically, Ahmed Nursaid Elmi." The color drained from Ilhan Omar's face so quickly it was visible even under the studio lights. The change was dramatic, shocking, unmistakable. Her confident expression dissolved into something that looked like panic. Watching someone realize their deepest secret might be exposed on national television is like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I don't think my personal relationships are relevant to this discussion, Omar began, her voice suddenly uncertain. Your immigration history is absolutely relevant when you're lecturing Americans about immigration policy, Tulsi said firmly. Especially when there are serious, documented questions about immigration fraud. She pulled up a detailed timeline on the screens behind them. Dates, names, documents, all organized with military precision. The timeline appeared, clear and methodical. 2002, religious marriage to Ahmed Hiasi not legally recognized. 2 children born. 2008, separation from Hiasi. 2009, legal marriage to Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. 2011-2012, living with Hiasi again while still legally married to Elmi. More children born with Hiasi. 2017, divorce from Elmi. Process complicated because his whereabouts are unknown. 2018, legal marriage to Hiasi. 2019, divorce from Hiasi. 2020, marriage to Tim Minot, her campaign consultant. 4 different men, Tulsi said, walking through the timeline methodically. Multiple overlapping relationships. Children with one man while legally married to another. Tax returns filed jointly with someone who wasn't your legal spouse. But the really interesting part is Ahmed Nursaid Elmi, your legal husband from 2009 to 2017. She pulled up additional images on the screens. Photographs, school records, social media screenshots, all meticulously sourced and documented. Multiple investigations by journalists, by Minnesota state agencies, by researchers have uncovered substantial evidence suggesting that Ahmed Nursaid Elmi is your brother. The audience gasped. Even those who'd heard the rumors seemed shocked to hear it stated so directly on national television. That's a disgusting racist smear, Omar started, her voice shaking slightly. Then prove it wrong, Tulsi cut her off. Show us Ahmed Nursaid Elmi's birth certificate. Show us his immigration documents. Take a DNA test. Release any documentation that would disprove the allegation. If this is false, if it's a conspiracy theory, you have access to all the evidence that would prove it. She pulled up more documentation on the screens. Here's what investigators have found. Photos that appear to show you and Elmi as children in Somalia, seemingly from the same family. School records from Somalia listing the same parents. Family members on social media calling him your brother before you systematically deleted those posts. Immigration documents with irregularities. A birth date that matches your brother's birth date from other records. More images appeared. School photos, family photos, social media screenshots captured before deletion, each one adding to the circumstantial evidence. The allegation is that you married your brother to commit immigration fraud, either to get him into the country or to give him citizenship status or to help him with student aid. And you have consistently refused to release any documents that would disprove it. Omar gripped the edges of her podium, her knuckles white. Why? Tulsi pressed. If this is false, if it's a racist conspiracy theory as you claim, you can end it right now. Birth certificates, immigration records, DNA tests. Release them. Clear your name. Prove everyone wrong. Silence. You can't or you won't, Tulsi said. Either you don't have documents that would disprove it, or you refuse to release them. Either way, the American people are left with unanswered questions about your immigration history. She pulled up Minnesota Campaign Finance Board documents on the screens. But let me tell you what we can prove, even without the brother allegation. You filed joint tax returns with Ahmed Hiasi in 2014 and 2015. That's documented in Minnesota state investigations. But during those years, you were legally married to Ahmed Nursaid Elmi. Official documents appeared on screen, complete with state letterhead and violation notices. Filing joint tax returns with someone who isn't your legal spouse is tax fraud, not alleged, not conspiracy theory, not speculation, documented, proven, admitted. She held up the fine documentation. You paid a fine of $3,469 to the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board for multiple violations, including improper use of campaign funds and filing joint tax returns with the wrong person. You paid the fine. which is essentially an admission of guilt, but you never explained what actually happened. You just paid it and moved on, hoping nobody would notice or care. Tulsi walked closer to Omar's podium, her expression intense. Think about this, Congresswoman. You came here as a refugee. The immigration system gave you everything: safety from violence, escape from poverty, education, opportunities, eventually a seat in Congress. The American dream realized. Her voice hardened. And you potentially gamed that system, committed fraud, married your brother to manipulate immigration status, then filed fraudulent tax returns. These aren't wild accusations from conspiracy theorists. There's documented evidence, documented fines, documented irregularities, documented refusal to release documents that would clear your name. She pointed at Omar. You lecture us constantly about immigration reform. You want open borders. You want amnesty for everyone. You attack ICE. You attack border enforcement. You attack anyone who thinks immigration laws should actually be followed and enforced. You present yourself as a champion of immigrants. She shook her head slowly. But you won't answer basic questions about your own immigration, about your potential fraud, about your manipulation of the system you claim to want to reform. You won't release documents. You won't take a DNA test. You won't provide any evidence that would disprove the allegations. Her final line was devastating. That's not advocacy, that's hypocrisy, or it's guilt. You choose which one. Won't release documents to disprove brother marriage allegations. Won't explain the tax fraud. Won't answer questions about immigration irregularities. Ask yourself why. Share if you think she owes Americans answers. Martha McCallum, seeing that this debate had become something far more significant than anyone had anticipated, moved to her next topic. Let's discuss ethics and transparency in government, which both of you have. Perfect topic, Tulsi said before Martha could finish. Let's discuss Congresswoman Omar's $2.8 million problem. She pulled out Federal Election Commission filings, held them up for the cameras to see clearly. Your current husband, Tim Minot, runs a political consulting firm called the E Street Group. It does work for Democratic campaigns, including yours. How much has your campaign paid his firm since you married him? Omar tried to deflect. Political campaigns hire consultants all the time. That's standard. How much? Tulsi pressed. Silence. $2.8 million, Tulsi said, pulling up the exact figures on the screens. Your campaign has paid your husband's firm $2.8 million, almost $3 million in campaign donations funneled directly to your husband's business. The numbers appeared on screen, pulled directly from FEC reports. Each payment documented, each amount clear, each date recorded. But it gets much more interesting when we look at the timeline of your relationship with Tim Minot. A new timeline appeared on the screens. 2018. Minot begins consulting for Omar's campaign. Both are married to other people. August 2019. Minot's wife, Bate Jordan Minot, files for divorce, specifically citing an affair with Ilhan Omar. Her divorce filing explicitly states, defendant's more recent travel and long work hours now appear to the plaintiff to be more related to his affair with Rep. Ilhan Omar. October 2019. Omar divorces Ahmed Hiasi, her third husband. March 2020. Omar marries Tim Minot. 2020-2024. E Street Group receives $2.8 million from Omar's campaign. So let me walk through what happened here, Tulsi said, her voice dripping with disgust. You hired a political consultant. While both of you were married to other people, you started an affair. His wife found out and specifically cited you by name in divorce proceedings. Then you divorced your husband. Then you married your consultant. Then you funneled $2.8 million in donor money to his firm. She pulled up the FEC filings with payment details. Let's look at what this money supposedly paid for. Travel expenses, $780,000. Funny how many of those travel expenses were to cities where you just happened to be together. Consulting fees, $1.2 million for advice that apparently included marrying the consultant. Media production, $650,000. Fundraising consulting, $420,000. She looked up from the documents. This isn't legitimate campaign work. This is you using donor money to funnel millions to your husband's business. That's not consulting. That's a con. That's using campaign funds as a personal piggy bank. Omar tried to defend. These are legitimate campaign expenses that were properly reported. The Minnesota Campaign Finance Board investigated you, Tulsi interrupted. They found violations. You paid a fine of $3,469, which at the time was the largest ethics fine for a House member. She held up the fine documentation again. You paid the fine, which is basically admitting you did something wrong, but you never explained what you actually did wrong. You just paid it and moved on, hoping it would go away. She put down the documents and looked directly at Omar. Let me tell you what happened here. You hired a consultant. You started an affair with him while both of you were married to other people. His wife discovered the affair and cited you in divorce documents. You divorced your husband. You married the consultant. Then you funneled $2.8 million in campaign donations to his business. The audience sat riveted, many looking disgusted. People donated to your campaign in good faith. Small dollar donations from teachers, nurses, working families. People who sent you $25 or $50 because they believed in your message, because they thought you were fighting for them, because they trusted you. Her voice hardened, and you used that money to enrich your husband, to fund your personal relationship, to build a family business on the backs of people who trusted you. That's not representation. That's theft. She pulled up a comparison chart on the screens. You ran on getting money out of politics. You attacked corporate influence. You called yourself a reformer. You aligned with the squad promising to fight corruption and represent working people. She pointed at the FEC numbers on the screen. But you're doing exactly what you claim to oppose. Using your position to enrich yourself and your family. Funneling donor money to your husband's business. Having an affair with someone on your campaign payroll, then marrying him and giving him millions. That's not reform. That's corruption with a progressive brand. Her final statement was delivered with unconcealed contempt. This isn't about religion or race or any identity. This is about you using campaign donations as a personal enrichment scheme. That's fraud. That's corruption. And that's exactly what you claim to fight against. $2.8 million to husband's firm from campaign donations. Largest ethics fine for a House member. Started as an affair while both married, but claims to fight corruption. Share if you see the scam. Omar, clearly rattled and desperate to change topics, tried to pivot. I've been a consistent voice for peace and justice in our foreign policy. Let's talk about your views on terrorism, Tulsi interrupted. Specifically, your views on Al-Qaeda. She made air quotes with her fingers as she said the name. With air quotes. She queued up video footage, and it began playing on the massive screens. The video showed Omar in an interview discussing her college experience, specifically a terrorism class she'd taken. As she talked about the professor mentioning Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah, she physically made air quotes with her fingers. The professor would say Al-Qaeda. Omar's voice came through the speakers as she gestured with air quotes, and sort of like add this very complicated, nuanced discussion. And so, to me, I was sort of like, it's interesting that when victims of Western imperialism decided to do something. The video continued, showing Omar making dismissive air quotes multiple times, treating terrorist organizations as if they were concepts rather than real groups that had murdered thousands. Tulsi let the video play in its entirety, then turned to Omar. Al-Qaeda, the terrorist organization that killed 2,977 Americans on September 11th. That bombed our embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing hundreds. That attacked the USS Cole, killing 17 sailors. That has murdered thousands of people around the world. And you use air quotes when saying their name. She shook her head slowly, her expression one of disbelief. Hezbollah, the terrorist organization that killed 241 United States Marines in the Beirut barracks bombing. That has killed hundreds of Americans over decades. designated as a terrorist organization by the United States government. And you use air quotes. She walked toward Omar's podium. You describe terrorism, the deliberate murder of civilians to achieve political goals, as victims of Western imperialism deciding to do something. That's not analysis. That's not nuanced discussion. That's justification. That's excusing mass murder as an understandable response to policy disagreements. The audience was completely silent, everyone transfixed. This isn't an isolated statement. This is a pattern. Let's review. She ticked items off on her fingers. You minimized 9/11 as some people did something. You made air quotes for Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah. You compared the United States to Hamas and the Taliban in a CNN interview. You consistently downplay al-Shabaab, the Somali terrorist group that has murdered countless innocents, including Americans. You never condemn Islamic terrorism without immediately adding "but America" or "but Western policy" or "but colonialism." She pulled up more footage on the screens. When you visited Somalia in 2022, you were treated like a returning hero. You held massive rallies. You met with government officials. You talked about Somali nationalism. Video played of Omar in Somalia. Large crowds cheering her. Her speaking in Somali to enthusiastic audiences. Her being celebrated as a hero. You know what you didn't do? You didn't meet with victims of al-Shabaab. You didn't visit communities that have been terrorized by that Somali terrorist group. You didn't talk about the Americans and aid workers they've murdered. You didn't condemn their violence. The video continued showing Omar waving to crowds, giving speeches about Somalia's future, being treated like a conquering hero returning home. And in one of your speeches, you said something revealing. You said, and I quote, "We must ask ourselves what country we are from." She replayed that specific clip, Omar's exact words clear. Not "I'm American," not "I'm from Minnesota," not "I represent the United States." You said we, plural, must ask ourselves what country we're from, as if you and others like you aren't American first, as if your primary identity is Somali, not American. Tulsi walked back to her podium, her military bearing pronounced. You're a member of the United States Congress. You took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. You swore allegiance to America, but you identify as Somali first. You minimize terrorism against Americans. You use air quotes for terrorist organizations. You excuse violence as an understandable response to Western policy. Her voice rose, controlled anger breaking through. I served in combat against terrorists, real terrorists, not air quote terrorists. I've seen what they do to innocent people. Muslims, Christians, men, women, children. They don't discriminate in their cruelty. They murder anyone who doesn't submit to their ideology. They use the most brutal methods imaginable to create fear and enforce compliance. She pointed at the screen showing Omar making air quotes. And you sit in Congress making air quotes about them, treating them like they're misunderstood victims, describing their actions as understandable responses, minimizing the horror of what they do. Her final question was delivered with intensity that cut through the room. So let me ask you directly, Congresswoman Omar, whose side are you on? Because from where I sit, looking at your statements, your gestures, your pattern of minimizing terrorism and excusing violence against Americans, it doesn't look like you're on America's side. Air quotes for Al-Qaeda. Some people did something for 9/11. We must ask what country we're from, not "I'm American." Comment whose side if you see the problem. Omar was visibly shaken, her prepared talking points completely abandoned, her usual defenses failing. I love this country, she said, her voice lacking conviction. I'm grateful for the opportunities America has given me. Tulsi actually laughed, not a polite chuckle but a genuine laugh of disbelief. Show me, she said. Show me one time, just one, where you've defended America without immediately attacking it. Silence. One speech, one interview, one tweet, where you praise America, defend America, express genuine gratitude for America without adding "but" or "however" or "except," without immediately pivoting to criticism. Omar opened her mouth, clearly searching her memory, but nothing came. I'll wait, Tulsi said. leaning back against her podium with exaggerated patience. Seconds ticked by. The silence became excruciating. There are many instances where I've discussed America's potential, Omar tried weakly. Name one, Tulsi pressed. Just one specific example. More silence. You can't, can you? Because it doesn't exist. Tulsi pulled up a compilation video, and it began playing on the screens. Omar's voice, from multiple speeches and interviews. America was founded on genocide. We must recognize that America is not the moral leader it claims to be. American imperialism has destroyed countries around the world. America is an empire built on stolen land and slave labor. Clip after clip, quote after quote, all of Omar criticizing, attacking, condemning America. Her voice, her words, her consistent pattern of hostility toward the country that had given her everything. That's just a sample, Tulsi said as the video ended. I could show you hours more. Your entire political career is built on attacking America. Every speech, every interview, every policy position starts from the premise that America is fundamentally evil, irredeemably corrupt, built on oppression. She pulled up comparative statistics on the screens. Let's talk about Somalia versus America. Somalia, where you were born. America, where you built your life. Numbers appeared. Somalia GDP per capita, $447. America GDP per capita, $76,000. Somalia life expectancy, 57 years. America life expectancy, 78 years. Somalia corruption ranking, 172nd out of 180 countries. America corruption ranking, 27th out of 180 countries. Somalia press freedom, near bottom globally. America press freedom, top 50 globally. Somalia women's rights, severe restrictions, female genital mutilation widespread. America women's rights, among the most protected in the world. You left a country torn apart by war, poverty, corruption, clan violence. You came to a country with opportunity, freedom, prosperity, protection under law. She gestured to the screens. And you spend every single day attacking the country that saved you while never criticizing the country that failed you. You never talk about Somalia's corruption. You never discuss clan violence or al-Shabaab's terrorism or the oppression of women. But you endlessly attack America. She walked closer to Omar. Here's my question. If America is so terrible, if it's built on genocide, if it's an evil empire, if it's fundamentally corrupt and oppressive, why did you come here? Why did your family seek refuge here instead of Saudi Arabia or Egypt or any other Muslim-majority country? Omar started to answer, but Tulsi continued. And why do you stay? Somalia is a sovereign nation. You could renounce your American citizenship and return, but you don't. Why? She answered her own question. Because America gave you opportunities you would never have in Somalia. You wouldn't be a member of parliament there. Women have almost no political power in Somalia. You wouldn't have the freedom to criticize the government. Journalists and dissidents are killed. You wouldn't have the platform, the voice, the power you have here. Her voice hardened. You wouldn't be able to do any of the things you do here. Somalia doesn't have those freedoms. Somalia doesn't have those opportunities. Somalia doesn't protect women's rights the way America does. Somalia doesn't have free speech or free press or equal protection under law. She pointed directly at Omar. But you can't admit that. You can't express genuine gratitude. You can't say one positive thing about America without immediately tearing it down. Because your entire political brand is built on grievance, on resentment, on presenting yourself as a victim of the very country that gave you everything. Tulsi returned to her podium. Her expression one of contempt mixed with pity. I enlisted after 9/11. I deployed to Iraq. I deployed to Kuwait. I served in uniform for over 20 years. Not because America is perfect. It's not. No country is. But because America is worth defending. Because for all its flaws, all its mistakes, all its historical injustices that we're still working to address, it's still the greatest nation on earth. She looked directly at Omar. Still the place where a refugee can become a member of Congress. Still, the place where freedom and opportunity exist in ways unmatched anywhere else. Still the place where people risk their lives to come to, not escape from. Her voice softened, but became even more cutting. You had the exact same journey to Congress that I did. Actually, yours was easier since you didn't have to serve in combat first, didn't have to spend 20 years in military service. We both got here because America allows it, because America creates those opportunities, because America, despite all its flaws, is still the land of opportunity. She paused. The difference between us. I'm grateful. You're resentful. I defend America while acknowledging its flaws. You attack America while enjoying its benefits. I love this country enough to serve it in uniform, to risk my life for it. You seem to love only what it gives you while hating what it is. Her final question hung in the air like an indictment. So I'll ask again. Do you love America? Or do you just love what America gave you while resenting that you needed it? Attacks America daily. Never defends it without adding but. Won't express gratitude. Share if you think representatives should actually love the country they serve. Martha McCallum, recognizing they were approaching the end of their allotted time, and that this debate had become genuinely historic, gave both participants a chance for closing statements. Congresswoman Omar, your closing thoughts. Omar gathered herself, fell back on her most familiar defense mechanism. Tonight has been another example of the Islamophobia and racism that I face constantly as a black Muslim woman in Congress. These personal attacks, these conspiracy theories, this refusal to accept that a Muslim woman of color can serve in Congress and speak truth to power. It's all designed to silence voices like mine that challenge the status quo and fight for justice. Tulsi Gabbard stood up from her podium, a dramatic move that immediately drew every eye in the room. No, she said firmly, we're not ending with that deflection. The audience leaned forward. Omar looked startled. You've hidden behind accusations of Islamophobia and racism your entire career, Tulsi said, walking to the center of the stage. Every time someone asks you a tough question, every time someone demands accountability, every time someone points out your statements or your actions or your contradictions, you cry bigotry, you claim victim status, and you hope everyone will back down rather than be accused of prejudice. She stopped in the center of the stage, standing between both podiums. Tonight that ends. She began to recite from memory, her voice taking on the formal, solemn tone of someone reciting something sacred. I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter. So help me God. She let the words settle over the room like a blanket. That's the oath you took when you became a member of Congress on January 3, 2019. The oath to support and defend the Constitution. The oath to bear true faith and allegiance to the United States. The same oath I took when I joined the military. The oath every federal official takes. She looked directly at Omar. Have you kept that oath? Before Omar could respond, Tulsi began walking through everything methodically, like a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. You minimized 9/11, the worst attack on American soil by foreign enemies. That's not defending America against enemies. That's minimizing what they did. You spread anti-Semitism, attacking Jewish Americans with classic conspiracy theories about money and power. That's not supporting the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection. That's bigotry. You potentially committed immigration fraud, gaming the very system that gave you refuge. That's not bearing true faith and allegiance. That's betraying the system that saved you. You funneled $2.8 million in campaign donations to your husband's firm. That's not faithfully discharging your duties. That's corruption. You made air quotes for Al-Qaeda and excused terrorism as an understandable response to Western policy. That's not defending America against enemies. That's sympathizing with them. You identified yourself as Somali, telling people to ask what country they're from rather than identifying as American. That's not bearing true faith and allegiance to the United States. That's divided loyalty. You attack America constantly while never defending it, while never expressing genuine gratitude for the opportunities it gave you. That's not supporting and defending the Constitution. That's resenting the country you swore to serve. She walked closer to Omar's podium. Every part of that oath, every single clause you violated. Not once, not accidentally, but repeatedly, consistently, as a pattern of behavior spanning your entire career. The room was completely silent, 200 people holding their breath. So here's what Americans want to know, Congresswoman Omar, and I want you to answer honestly. She paused, letting the moment build. Are you an American who happens to be Somali? Or are you a Somali who happens to be in America? She let that question sit. Do you love America? Or do you love only what America gave you? Another pause. Do you serve the Constitution you swore to defend? Or do you serve an ideology that excuses terrorism, minimizes attacks on Americans, and resents the very nation you represent? Omar tried to respond, her voice shaking. These are outrageous accusations. I have always. No, Tulsi cut her off. You've served yourself. You've served your family, funneling millions to your husband. You've served your ideology, defending terrorists and attacking America. But you haven't served the country that elected you. She returned to the center of the stage. I served this country in uniform. I deployed to combat zones. I risked my life for America, not because it's perfect, but because I believe in what it represents, because I'm grateful for the opportunities it gave me, because I love this country enough to defend it with my life if necessary. She pointed at Omar. You came here as a refugee. You were given everything: safety from violence, escape from poverty, education, opportunity, power, a seat in Congress, and you spend every day attacking the country that saved you. That's not service, that's resentment, that's contempt. Her final statement was delivered with absolute conviction, every word landing like a hammer. You took an oath to support and defend the Constitution, but you mock that oath every time you minimize terrorism, spread anti-Semitism, excuse violence, attack America, and identify as Somali first. You mock it every time you hide behind accusations of bigotry rather than answer for your actions. She walked back to her podium, composed, mission accomplished. Americans are asking whose side you're on. Tonight answered that question. Your silence, your inability to defend America without attacking it, your refusal to release documents proving your innocence, your pattern of excusing enemies and attacking your own country. That silence is the loudest answer of all. She sat down. The audience erupted. Not everyone, Omar's supporters sat in shocked silence, but the majority rose to their feet, applauding. The ovation lasted nearly a minute. Martha McCallum had completely lost control of the broadcast, but it didn't matter anymore. This was history being made in real time. Ilhan Omar sat frozen at her podium. She couldn't cry Islamophobia, Tulsi had used her own words. She couldn't claim racism, everything was documented. She couldn't deflect, every accusation had been backed by evidence. She had nothing left, no defense, no explanation, no way out. The cameras captured everything, her face drained of confidence, her hands gripping the podium. The moment when the victimhood narrative met documented facts and lost. It was over. The footage hit social media before Omar had even left the building. By the time both participants reached their cars through different exits, Omar's security hustling her out a side door while Tulsi walked out the front entrance to cheers. The first clips had already reached 15 million views. By midnight, 78 million views. By 96 hours, 167 million views across all platforms. TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, international news sites. It was everywhere. Whose side are you on? Became an instant cultural phenomenon. Within hours, it appeared on t-shirts, hats, bumper stickers, protest signs. It became the question conservatives asked about every controversial politician, every anti-American activist, every person who seemed to benefit from America while attacking it. Omar exposed trended for 8 straight days, spawning countless memes. Omar making air quotes with captions about various things she minimized. The "some people did something," quote, permanently attached to her image. The brother marriage allegations, long dismissed as conspiracy theory by mainstream media, suddenly impossible to ignore. Fox News played the debate on loop for 12 days straight. They brought in investigators who'd worked on the marriage allegations, suddenly given mainstream platform to present evidence that had been buried for years. They interviewed former Omar associates who confirmed the timeline. They showed the documents Tulsi had referenced, now fully public and undeniable. CNN and MSNBC tried damage control. Context needed. Omar's statements under attack was CNN's initial angle, but their own audiences weren't buying it. The comments on their articles and videos were brutal. How do you provide context for "some people did something"? The evidence is documented. Stop defending the indefensible. She made air quotes for Al-Qaeda. Explain that. Even liberal outlets had to acknowledge the damage. The New York Times ran a piece. Omar's past statements returned to haunt her. The Washington Post. Questions about immigration and ethics dog Minnesota Congresswoman. Politico. Can Ilhan Omar survive her own words? The answer was becoming increasingly clear. Omar's office went radio silent for 72 hours. No statements, no press releases, no tweets. Her communications team was in full crisis mode, trying to figure out how to respond when everything Tulsi had said was documented and verifiable. When Omar finally tweeted, it was predictably weak. Tonight's attacks were rooted in Islamophobia and racism, but I will not be silenced. I will continue fighting for justice, for equality, for the values that make America great. The replies were absolutely savage. Over 140,000 comments in 3 hours, maybe 8% supportive. Address the marriage allegations. Release the documents if it's false. Explain "some people did something." Why did you use air quotes for Al-Qaeda? $2.8 million to your husband. Explain. Stop hiding behind Islamophobia. Whose side are you on? She got ratioed so severely that political analysts started using it as a textbook case of losing narrative control. The political fallout was swift and devastating. Within 96 hours, 4 separate ethics complaints were filed by Republican members, by watchdog organizations, and shockingly, by a group calling itself Progressive Muslims for Accountability, who said, "Being Muslim doesn't give you a pass for anti-Semitism, corruption, or dishonesty." The House Ethics Committee, under pressure from all sides, announced it would investigate the campaign finance allegations and re-examine the marriage fraud allegations. For the first time since taking office, Omar faced real institutional consequences. Minnesota state investigators announced they were reopening their examination of her immigration and tax records. The brother marriage allegations, long dismissed as conspiracy theory, were suddenly being taken seriously by law enforcement. A primary challenger emerged within 1 week, a Somali-American Marine veteran who announced his candidacy with a powerful video. "I served this country in uniform. I'm proud to be American. I'm proud to be Somali-American, but I'm American first. And Minnesota deserves representation that loves this country." His fundraising exploded. $2.7 million in the first 4 days. Polling in Minnesota's 5th district showed Omar's approval collapsing from 63% approve, 31% disapprove, to 26% approve, 67% disapprove. In just 3 weeks, even among Democrats in her district, she'd lost catastrophic ground, down to 44% approval from 79%. Democratic leadership, which had always been uncomfortable with Omar and the squad, now openly distanced themselves. Hakeem Jeffries, when asked about the debate, gave a terse response. Every member is accountable for their own statements. Nancy Pelosi said nothing. The silence from party leadership was deafening. They were cutting her loose. Omar lost her seat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. The official reason was committee reorganization, but everyone knew it was punishment. She was toxic now, a liability to the party, someone who couldn't be defended without Democrats looking like they supported anti-Semitism and anti-American rhetoric. The squad tried to rally around her. AOC tweeted support. Rashida Tlaib called the debate a racist hit job. Anna Presley invoked civil rights history. Cori Bush compared it to attacks on black women in Congress. But their defenses fell flat. The evidence was too documented. The clips were too clear. Omar's own words were too damning. And significantly, their defenses started getting ratioed too. Their own supporters questioning why they were defending someone who'd minimized 9/11, spread anti-Semitism, and refused to release documents proving her innocence. The cultural impact extended far beyond politics. Military veterans organized "Thank You Tulsi" events across the country. VFW posts, American Legion halls, veterans groups. They played the debate, discussed it, and expressed gratitude that finally someone had defended their service against false accusations of war crimes. Muslim American groups were split. Progressive Muslim organizations defended Omar, calling the debate Islamophobic. But conservative and moderate Muslim groups praised Tulsi, with one imam writing, "Being Muslim doesn't mean supporting anti-Semitism or excusing terrorism. Ilhan Omar does not represent us." Jewish organizations universally praised Tulsi for calling out Omar's anti-Semitism. The Anti-Defamation League issued a statement thanking her for standing against hatred and conspiracy theories targeting Jewish Americans. 4 weeks after the debate, 60 Minutes did an investigative special on the marriage allegations. They examined the evidence Tulsi had presented, interviewed investigators, reviewed documents. Their conclusion: while we cannot definitively prove the allegations, the circumstantial evidence is substantial, and Congresswoman Omar's refusal to release documents that would clear her name raises serious questions that deserve answers. Even 60 Minutes couldn't ignore it anymore. 6 weeks after the debate, Ilhan Omar held a press conference. "After much consideration and discussion with my family, I've decided to step aside and not seek re-election in 2026. I'm proud of my time in Congress, and I leave with my head held high, ready to serve the community in other ways." The statement was carefully worded to sound voluntary, but everyone knew the truth. She'd been forced out. The debate had destroyed her political career. She couldn't survive the scrutiny, couldn't answer the questions, couldn't escape her own words. Tulsi Gabbard became a national hero to millions of Americans. Her approval rating skyrocketed, up 52 points among independents, strong support even from moderate Democrats, near universal acclaim from Republicans and veterans. She was invited everywhere: universities, veteran organizations, town halls, podcasts, news shows. Everyone wanted to hear from the veteran who'd finally held Omar accountable. The debate fundamentally changed American political discourse. It showed that documentation defeats deflection, that facts overcome accusations of bigotry when the facts are indisputable, that calling someone racist or Islamophobic doesn't work when you're confronting them with their own words, their own actions, their own documented behavior. Most importantly, it answered the question millions had been asking for years: whose side is Ilhan Omar on? And the answer, made clear by her own statements, her own actions, and her telling silence, was not America's. This wasn't about Democrat versus Republican. This wasn't about religion or race or identity politics. This was about something more fundamental than policy disagreements or partisan divides. This was about loyalty, about gratitude, about the oath we ask our representatives to take and whether they honor it. Ilhan Omar came to America as a refugee at age 12. She fled Somalia, a nation torn apart by war and poverty and clan violence. America gave her safety. America gave her education. America gave her opportunities that would have been impossible in the country she left. Eventually, America gave her a seat in Congress, a position of power and influence that most people only dream about. And she spent her entire career attacking the country that saved her, minimizing the worst terrorist attack in American history, spreading anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, excusing terrorism as understandable response to Western policy, using air quotes for terrorist organizations that murdered thousands of Americans, identifying as Somali first rather than American, refusing to express genuine gratitude for the opportunities she'd been given. When asked to defend America without attacking it, she couldn't name a single example. When presented with evidence of potential immigration fraud, she refused to release documents that would prove her innocence. When confronted with her campaign finance corruption, she had no explanation beyond paying a fine and moving on. She thought she could hide behind accusations of Islamophobia and racism. She thought claiming victim status would protect her from accountability. She thought Americans would accept her narrative rather than examine the facts. She was wrong. Tulsi Gabbard did what needed to be done. She brought documentation. She presented facts. She asked direct questions. She demanded answers. And she refused to be intimidated by false accusations of bigotry. She did it as a veteran who'd actually served in combat, as someone who'd deployed to Iraq and Kuwait, who'd worn the uniform for 20 years, who'd earned the moral authority to question someone else's loyalty to America. And she asked the simple question that destroyed Ilhan Omar's career. Whose side are you on? Omar couldn't answer, because the honest answer, revealed through her statements, her actions, her pattern of behavior, was that she's not on America's side. She benefits from America while resenting it. She enjoys the opportunities America provides while attacking the nation that provides them. That's not representation, that's exploitation. Americans deserve representatives who love this country, who are grateful for its opportunities, who understand that serving in Congress is a privilege, not a platform for attacking the nation you represent, who honor the oath they take rather than mock it through their actions. Tulsi Gabbard showed us what real public service looks like: enlisting when your country is attacked, deploying to combat zones, serving in uniform for decades, risking your life for a nation you believe in. That's service. What Ilhan Omar did, using campaign donations to enrich her husband, spreading anti-Semitism, minimizing terrorism, attacking America while benefiting from it, that's not service. That's a con game. If you think representatives should love America and honor their oath, share this story. Comment the oath if you believe elected officials should defend the country they serve. Because Tulsi Gabbard asked the question that matters most. Whose side are you on? And Ilhan Omar's silence, her inability to defend America without attacking it, her refusal to answer questions about potential fraud, her pattern of excusing enemies while condemning her own country. That silence was the loudest answer of all. Real representatives serve America. Fake ones serve themselves. And Americans can tell the difference.